This is one of my favorite classes to teach because there's so many conditions and clauses in this contract that agents don't realize and overlook at the time that they're actually preparing an offer, because they're excited, typically in a hurry to get through it, and don't explain what the written document obligates the buyer and ultimately the seller to if they actually come to an agreement. Okay, good morning everybody.
Morning.
Marti here, Internal Dynamics School of Real Estate. I don't think I've met you before, Matt. I don't know if you've been to one of the classes before. Yeah. And no, Greg has. So welcome. This class is a little bit different. I don't teach from a PowerPoint on this one at all because we really get into the specifics of the contract. So I just want to make certain cell phones are off. We're going to take a break at 10:15. That'll give you plenty of time to return your calls, do your texting, that kind of thing. I don't. It's actually quite a distraction to others. And really, the real rule is the commissioner requires it, although I've not ever been audited on that one specific thing. So with that, those things in mind, I just kind of want to open a little bit about talking about, this is one of my favorite classes to teach because there's so many conditions and clauses in this contract that agents don't realize and overlook at the time that they're actually preparing an offer, because they're excited, typically in a hurry to get through it, and don't explain what the written document obligates the buyer and ultimately the seller to if they actually come to an agreement. Is that someone coming in?
It's like open escrow, give me the money, right?
It is. I get really excited to this day when people tell me they want to make an offer. I mean, my husband says I can just see a whole change in it. And it's true.
Well, that's why we do it.
That's right. I get very, very excited, and there are things that I forget to explain, to educate the best term. Hi, come in.
Hi.
Pick a chair.
Okay, I'm
That's
gonna
put you right there. Very nice.
We have to go through your contract, a couple of us, because there's one company out there, that's what they do. They focus in on the contract, and if there's any way to get something, they will use the contract, and I'll tell you, I don't know of anybody that knows the contract as an agency better than them, and because that's what they focus on, that's their power.
And who is this?
It's a real estate company up in Washington City.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because that's exactly one of the reasons that we have to do these classes, a better job of these classes. Because what is written in here is what you are obligated to, and it's what's enforceable. It's for Charlotte.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you picked them up already. Okay, so I want to go through your material and the handout that you have. We're actually going to get into scenarios today and discuss some of the issues that you might face. These are typical issues in Arizona. Does not apply anywhere else. So the first thing you have is this wonderful pre-printed document. It's all got sample forms in it. It includes, we've got a long list in here, and we're going to go through most of these. The 2017 purchase contract, the pre-qual form is in here, the LSU additional clause addendum, HOA, condominium and planned community addendum, buyer contingency addendum, counter offer form, the SPDS, the residential buyer inspection notice and seller's response. We're going to spend some time on that because that has created issues, even though we have as-is properties now. The buyer pre-closing walkthrough, appraisal contingency notice, unfulfilled loan contingency, cure period notice, and critical date list. So you're probably going to want to take some notes on this. My preference would be that you mark this thing up so that when you do meet with a buyer or a seller, you can refer back to it on things that you need to be explaining. So our contract is really a set of promises that both the buyer and the seller commit to. And then you have, and those promises are enforced by conditions and clauses in this document. So we get into the biggest issues are earnest money. What happens to the earnest money if this isn't done, if this isn't done, or whatever. And that is still the case with AAR. We're still having those kinds of challenges. So Grand Canyon teaches this course because they really want agents to be educated on how to protect their clients. So, yes, Grand Canyon, I'm sorry, yeah.
They're the unofficial
I call them
sponsor
Grand
of this
Canyon.
class.
I said Grand Canyon Title Agency. Yes. You're thinking college, right? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really? Yeah.
Well, they might have to update this because they're coming out with that new.
The new
notice
forms.
form.
But the flex forms are going to be available for quite some time. But yes, it's all going to be updated. This will all be changed.
This is 2017?
This is the
18.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's got the 2017 new contract in it from the AAR forms that got adjusted. So how many of you heard that our forms are being changed? And I haven't seen the new ones, so you're all aware of that. Have you seen the new ones?
I saw one new one. It was on the cure period notice because it was dated February 19. But I didn't see what they changed other than nothing. I didn't see.
Well, they probably aren't going to change any of our forms. It's just a different company providing them.
Oh, okay.
That's all it is. The forms aren't being updated. It's just the company that's providing them.
I see.
I thought that they said that zip forms was still, I thought that,
It'll still be available
Through
for,
the end of this year.
yeah, our contract runs through the end of this year, but they're really not servicing the system very well, actually. I think that's one of
That
the
was
big
the whole
complaints.
issue, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, and they were offering it at a really reduced price to AAR, and it was included in our membership dues. They raised our dues last year, and I think Zip Forms wanted a little bit more money for what they're providing. And I guess the maintenance is becoming quite a big issue for them because we're starting to grow again and develop more agents, licenses. So the work has increased for them, but the money hasn't for how many years now? I mean, we've had these forms forever. So it's the same forms. The forms belong to Arizona Association of Realtors and Arizona Regional Multiple Listing System. Those are the forms we use here in Maricopa and Pinal County. Now you get into some of the other associations and the forms are a little bit different. The MLS forms will be a little bit different. If you've ever filled out a form for the multiple listing system in Prescott, it's completely different than the form here.
We're getting Cochise now, so I wonder if they'll incorporate our
I
forms.
saw that, yeah, I'm wondering how they'll do that. We have the better forms here, I can tell you that. They're easier to fill out, easier to read, but that means they're gonna have to change what they know, everything that they know, just from looking at stuff. But ours are much more detailed, just a better presentation. So if you would, I've given you a handout, so you know, the Department of Real Estate requires an outline with each class that states an objective be provided to the students. So we're gonna cover everything that's in the outline. But what's really important is the contract questions and timelines, actually on page 3, 4, and then we're gonna get into some of these scenarios on page 5 and 6, this last one on 6. So you know how the rulings actually came out. So I've made notes. I mark this thing up all the time, and anytime I learn something new, I will highlight or I will write something additional in. And when I'm sitting with a buyer or a seller, I literally go through and explain. So the first thing I want you to be aware of is the difference between a condition or a provision of a contract and a clause. What does the clause mean? So a condition or a provision means the same thing under the law. And it means that somewhere there is a law that says this has to be this way. And then the clause further explains how it's going to be carried out within your traditional marketplace. For us, it would be Arizona. So everything in our contracts, and I have to tell you, Arizona Association of Realtors really ticks me off a lot. But I have to applaud them on the diligent effort that they take in developing these forms, because they are the best in the nation. We have many, many states that send people here to review our contracts and all of these addendum forms so that they can, even California, believe it or not, California is more and more adopting our own contract language because it's so much better prepared than anything else actually in the US. We've been applauded many, many times for this effort. And it's because we not only hire attorneys who have real estate knowledge, but we also poll the group. We get opinions from all of the entities that we work with, including title and escrow, including brokerage firms and property management specialists. So everybody gets to have an input. So to develop this contract, they work on it for about a year and a half, collecting data and meeting before it's actually finalized. That's why it's only done once every 5 years. We will only change this contract once every 5 years unless there is a federal law change or a statutory change that has to happen right away. So you can be proud of that. So so just remember that conditions and provisions are based on a statutory requirement, and then clauses will support. So let's kind of go through here. I'm just going to identify the sections. So I don't know how many of you use this first page. I always give this to the buyer as a checklist. I do a quick review of each one, and I will have a copy that I will have them check off and initial at the bottom that I actually reviewed this so that they know that we are no longer a buyer beware state, so the buyer must do their due diligence. And these are some resources, and along with that is the buyer advisory. So I will attach the buyer advisory to this document and have them initial this first page, and then they're supposed to sign the advisory.
Yes,
How many of your agents are actually signing the advisory? Do you know?
to my knowledge, I think all of us are.
Who reviews your files?
We do.
Yeah, so you know then whether they do or they don't. Yeah.
We require it.
It's
Yes.
required in mine, yeah.
Yeah, good. That's very good. Because that really is what has put a lot of the responsibility onto the buyer to be an active participant in their transaction in the process.
I tell my agents actually, that's part of your value up front even before you submit offers. When
Yes.
you first meet them, like I say, hey, here you go, start
Yes,
using it.
that's really great, Josh,
Yeah.
because I do the same thing. I email the buyer advisory right away, and I tell them, I want, call me, let's walk through page by page. Some of the stuff is not gonna apply to you, like waste, it depends on the area they're buying, but septic systems and that kind of stuff. I even attach maps, like the Anthem area has a lot of expansive soil. It's one of the big red zones in the state. So if they're going to be looking in that area, then I attach copies of the map so that they can see. And if they read it, it explains it. Same with the airport noise contour maps that are loaded on the ADRE website. So you can attach and send those. So they're loaded with information before they ever get here, typically. Okay, so this is my first page. So I just want to kind of go through a couple of pages here. The very first condition in section 1, and there are 9 sections in our contract, 9 sections. So section 1, it identifies the parties, it identifies the property, and it starts to spell out the very basic in terms. But the number 1 condition is line 3 and 4. Buyer agrees to buy and seller agrees to sell the real property with all improvements, fixtures, and appurtenances thereon or incidental thereto, plus the personal property described herein, collectively the premises. That sets the first condition of this agreement. The second condition is number 7, the legal description, also required by law. Without a legal description, you do not have a contract. No contract. It's kind of interesting how enforceable this document is. So back in my day, and I've been doing this since 1984, we were literally taught that the contract is the ruling document. When we take this to escrow, it's escrow's job to follow all of the terms and conditions in this 10-page agreement. And it wasn't happening. Earnest money was being refunded, we were getting a lot of challenges, and escrow said, well, we're kind of legislated by insurance companies and by the financial, the banking industry, which they still are. That has not changed. We now have the Arizona Department of Finance, which is different from what we had back in the 80s and 90s, yes.
Can we rely on the information on the tax record, copy and paste that?
Monson?
For using it for MLS,
For the description, legal description.
for the legal description, yes, you can.
We can rely on that.
Yes. There are challenges with the amount of information. So if you're in a meets and bounds area, then you do need to attach an exhibit, which we used to have to do all the time. So you go to the county records, which has the full legal description. So I started my real estate career in Prescott. We would literally, it was not uncommon to have a page and a half of legal description. Yeah, there was no subdivision, lot and block. We have very little of
Just
that.
meets and
A lot of
bounds.
fencing.
Yes, so we would,
Or the river, huh?
Yeah,
Three rocks
out
from
in
the
the
little
bush.
tree on
Right.
the north side.
benchmark located 45 degrees, you know, blah, 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 blah. But literally, some of those were a page and a half. So we typed in the legal description, attached Exhibit A or Exhibit B, whatever it was. Go to the county records, and you'd have to literally copy or cut and paste that whole thing. When computers came out, it was a lot easier. And attach it to your contract. Because without a legal description, you do not have a legal contract. There are certain things that have to be in there. One is the consideration to be paid, which is your next item on this list. So if you go to line 10, full purchase price, that is an indication of the consideration to be paid. So to have a legal real estate contract, there has to be consideration. Does it have to be money? No, it could be for love and affection. Like if you work in some of the college towns, parents are transferring their property that they bought for their daughter or son who went to the university for 4 years. Now they're going to give it to them because they've landed a solid job for love and affection. They don't have a sales price. So you can do that. You can deed property for love and affection. It does not have, but there has to be some consideration stated, a reason why, for it to be legal. So this whole section, through all of section 1, is all about the buyer's offering of value, what they consider of value. And that's what I tell buyers, that's what I tell sellers when I'm bringing a contract. All of section 1, we're going to talk about the buyer's offering for sale. This and their chosen method of how they're going to purchase this property. At that point, it's an offer, right? So let's scoot down to line 17, and you'll notice that in your handout is in red. That's because everything in red is what we changed with the 2017 contract. There were multiple things that got changed here that I think for the better. So earnest money is now on the first page, and right at the very, very top, and we have options about whether it's going to be a personal check, a wire transfer, or other. So what would other be?
Cashier's check maybe?
Could be a cashier's check, yes. Could be,
Car.
it could be, yeah, it could be a car, it could be a tractor. You know, I wrote one up one time that had a 1949 tractor, John Deere tractor or something that was, yeah. So it doesn't have to be dollars. And it doesn't even have to be a personal item. That could be love and affection as well. But it has to be stated. The thing I love,
Does value have to be determined on those items?
the IRS would be the one that would have an interest in that.
Not-
But you don't have to have it on the contract
Your
as
love
long
and
as it's
affection is not worth as
acceptable.
much as his love and affection.
That's right.
Love and affection is equal to the amount of the value of the property.
Well, and you know, that's
For
a good
today.
point, because that John Deere tractor I was telling you about, that was a 1949 tractor, had absolutely no value to the person offering it, but to the seller was a collector. Yeah, it had huge value. Whether it was completely authentic or not, he wanted it. So it had huge value. So it's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so The other thing I love about this is that it says upon acceptance of the offer, the earnest money, if any, will be deposited with either the escrow company or the broker's trust account.
Always the escrow.
The neat thing here is that it's after acceptance, so agents no longer have to accept an earnest money at the time. This is no longer a receipt. Remember our old contracts were a receipt for that earnest money. So you were giving them a receipt that you had taken money as the agent. And I never liked that. I used to just freak out having somebody's check thinking, oh yeah, this will drop out of my tablet or something and I'll lose it. Especially on a weekend, which is typically when I wrote contracts, was weekends.
So does there have to be a time frame within 24 hours? Or
Yeah,
Immediately.
upon acceptance. So
Like 26.
that's defined in the back of your contract. It tells you at the very, so with the broker, it's immediate. It should go to your broker's office immediate. What do we typically do? Throw it in our desk drawer until Monday morning, you know, until the broker's in or whatever, because my broker was never in the office on weekends. But for the escrow company, if you choose escrow company, then it has to be at the first business day, within 24 hours of the first
when
business
you
day.
open escrow?
Right, yes.
What is the value of depositing into a broker's trust account?
Today,
Yeah,
there is no value. And in fact, we never
There's
did that.
liability though.
I've never seen.
So I was with Realty Executives for years. They still have a broker trust account, but the checks never made it into the broker trust account. And it was never designated where they went in our contracts. It automatically said it would go into the broker trust account. There was no choice. However, they never did. I'd open escrow Monday morning and the check went with. So the broker never saw the earnest, they saw the copy of it, but they never saw the actual check. And now, the reason I love this is I don't have to collect the check.
It's made out to the title company.
And it's made out to the title company. So and in fact, I tell the buyer, if they're local, you need to be at the title company and deliver your check. Or if you're gonna wire, you've got so many hours to do it. Get your funds wired in.
There was a time when HUD was around that they required you to have a trust account because you had to put your funds in there and the earnest money had to come from the broker, not the buyer. So that's when the trust account was really used by a broker, when there's a lot of HUDs being done. But
That's
I don't
because
see
our
any
contract
HUD
read that way. Our contract said it had to go into the broker trust account.
So HUD was just listening to the contract. Very
Yeah,
carefully.
I didn't know it was a HUD requirement, but
Technically.
our contract actually read, that was your only option, was
Yeah.
broker trust account. But my broker never, ever actually took the check and put it into any account.
I don't think on any of the HUD homes I've sold did it ever go to, because our broker never even had a trust account.
Yeah,
He
Yeah.
just stayed away from the trust situation.
Yeah, and more brokers are moving that direction, they just don't want trust accounts. If you have a property management company, you have to have a trust account,
That
right?
makes sense.
Several, probably.
Yeah, look at him smiling.
We actually did not have one for the first 8 years.
We pioneered a new way of doing it,
You
actually.
know,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially to the landmark.
We just do a pass-through account,
Basically.
Yeah.
where it all
Yeah, we
records
were
here,
one
but
of the
goes
first
straight
ones
to
that
the owner.
Yeah.
oh, so that's good, you have.
We have all the records here, and we just facilitate it, it just passes through without stopping, records in our system, it goes straight to the owner, so if they wanted to audit anything, there's nothing to audit.
Right,
Except-
well, and there's no
records.
harm,
Except
right.
records.
Well, and that's really all they do is audit records. Especially today, our statutes are so old, producing canceled checks is impossible today because most people don't even use checks. I don't use checks anymore. I didn't even realize that I didn't use them. But somebody asked me the other day, can you send me a check? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I have one.
I have my landscaper, and he's the only reason I have to get checks right now. That's it.
For your desk. That's cool. So anyway, I love this whole change here. So your conditions, line 17, condition, line 18, and then a condition also is 19 and 20. If this is an all-cash sale, a letter of credit or a source of funds from a financial institution documenting the availability of funds to close the escrow is attached here too. So it doesn't go into section 2, which is all financing, because there is no financing. They got smart and moved this here.
Is
Yes,
this a good time to circle back really quick about earnest money?
yes.
Because in my opinion, it's mandatory. So in cases such as VA, what's your general rule?
On,
Like VA loans where there's like potentially no money down, no
The
closing
amount?
costs. How do you typically handle VA like in cases like that with earnest money and stuff? What's your
oh
rule?
yeah, I always write at least a $500 earnest money, yeah.
Okay.
They could get it back during escrow close if they needed to.
They get it back, or it'll apply to something else that they wind up having to pay, like the differences in taxes or whatever, if there's
Some
tax
closing
refund
costs
that
that
has to be made, or, yeah.
So you typically, it doesn't matter the price of the home and you just stick with 500, or what do you typically
Yeah.
kind of follow the same rules as other buyers, or how, like?
A lot of it depends on, and this is just a personal preference, a lot of it depends on how many of the items the buyer is asking the seller to pay for. If it's everything, which is really tough to negotiate right now, but if it is everything, then I don't write a real large earnest money check. If the seller wants earnest money assurances to make certain that there's no buyer default in this situation, they can always counter with that.
Okay.
On VAs, I've never had that countered,
Yeah.
but I have had it countered on other types of financing and even cash deals. I've had them countered depending upon the price range of the property.
As of late, I've like on a couple of my listings over the last 6 months, I've had a couple come with none or $100, and I was kind of taken aback just a little bit.
$100 is a little
Yeah.
bit low, I would think, because
I'm
even if
working on
you're
500,
gonna,
same as you. That's just the
Yeah.
standard thing. I go 5. I don't know why.
Yeah.
That just kind of defaulted.
and if it's an expensive property, which it could be, because some buyers qualify for that higher amount of VA loan, then the seller may want some
A
assurances.
form of earnest money is required, isn't it? That's the good faith, or whatever, that the buyer's putting
It shows good
forward.
faith, yes, it shows good faith. And that's what it's for, is to reassure. The other challenge with earnest money in our contract and the way our laws are written is that it's the only recourse the seller has specific to this contract.
Exactly.
So they accept that, or they take it to private action. And same with the buyer, their recourse is they get their earnest money back. So is there value in it? Yes, there's value in it. And where you see that is in the fights where the contracts don't come together and close. It, is $500 worth it? Taking my house off the market for 6 weeks, waiting for you to qualify for a VA loan, and you didn't perform. And I have to tell you too, the other neat thing about this that's being enforced is it's really not a free look. This 10-day inspection period is not a free look. That got promoted a lot way back when we first started doing the 10-day inspections, when we became a buyer responsibility state. And people said, well, they get a 10-day free look. No, you have to have a specific reason. If you're gonna tie this property up and take it off the market, because the way our laws are written, once you have a contract, it's not for sale anymore. It's just not, and we can't promote it that way. Then you're gonna pay for that if you're not gonna perform.
And if you don't perform, you wanna make sure you get your half as the broker for the work you've done and what the seller's been through. So per our listing,
Right.
you get half of that earnest deposit that's forfeited.
Well, you get a percentage.
The listing agreement says half, the full commission or half.
Yes, it's either full or
Or
half,
half the
whichever one is less. It's whichever one is less.
Right.
That's the key.
So deposit.
Okay, $20,000 earnest deposits from
There
now
you
on.
go.
Yes. Yes.
Thinking.
Well, you think about this, and those of you who have been around a long time, you know this. I have done so much work for free, and I don't mind having done it or doing it, but not anymore.
Right.
I'm just not anymore. Because at that time, I could trust that my clients were gonna continue to work with me and stay with me, so there was a longevity in the relationship.
Yeah.
Not so today. Not so today. People just don't stick with you. And they're always apologetic, and they're always really sorry, but there's always a good reason why they. So now, I like to get paid for what I do. So That's
So
just,
that 500 just turned into 1,000
yeah.
or more.
You can actually make it, you know, whatever the buyer is comfortable with. But if you're dealing with the VA and they're looking to have the seller pay all of those expenses, it's typically because they just don't have the cash up front to do it. So it depends on their situation. Although I wrote a $750,000 VA deal
Wow.
where the buyer had plenty of money and still wanted the seller to pay for everything. And it was a long negotiation. And actually the seller wound up going with a different loan for a number of reasons and his own validation. But it was a tough deal to put together. The other thing you need to know about VA, and particularly here in Arizona, and I don't know why just here, properties with septic systems and wells, very, very tough to get approved through VA. And community wells, where there's several people on an agreement, probably not going to approve it.
In general, I thought it was, well, at least there's 4 or less. But a lot of them
That's
have
FHA.
4. Yeah. Yeah, I
That's
thought it was the
FHA.
same guy.
FHA too?
Well, FHA, you can't have more than 5 people on a well.
I thought VA was
More or
the
less.
same guideline on that one.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And out in New River, they're used to, it was like, the most that you would typically see would be 4. But out in New River now, they're slipping it up to 5.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing
can
it
do
in
it, it's just
Tonto
minus.
Verde,
Yeah.
Tonto Verde area, all along the Rio Verde out there. Same thing, where they're having one major well. And developers are buying up, you know, they're staying just under that 6 or more lots, so they're dividing 5 properties and putting in one community well with the well agreement. And they're not approved for VA and probably not FHA, I did not know that, but, yeah. So you need to be very, very careful of those things. And sellers don't know that, so they don't disclose it. They don't know that it might impact their ability, so when the listing agent is filling out the listing agreement, they need to be asking those kinds of questions. Okay, moving right along. So 21, 22, and 23 is also conditions, the close of escrow. This is a provision of the law. Says that close of escrow shall occur when the deed is recorded at the appropriate county recorder's office. This was something that got decided by the Arizona Supreme Court back in the 1980s. And it came out of a Tucson situation where the river, the Rieto River, there was an office condominium project. And in fact, the people that sold that are still licensed brokers in the state of Arizona. They owned the building, it was in escrow. Friday afternoon comes, it had been raining. If any of you were in Arizona in the 1980s, we had really good monsoon seasons. Lots of rain in the summer months. It did not record, but nobody knew that until Monday morning. Money was distributed, went out to the sellers, and loan money was taken in, and keys were transferred late Friday afternoon, before 5 o'clock. Monday rolls around, and the building is literally in the river. The river had swollen, and it collapsed. I have pictures of it. I mean, it's just the most amazing thing. And I remember when it happened. I was living right here in Arizona. And so it got challenged. The buyer said, oh no, this is not our building. It had not recorded. So there was everybody suing everybody. It winds up at the Arizona Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court of Arizona now says that the official close of escrow is once you have received that recording number, or now the SKU number, or whatever they call the new number if you do it electronically. But that's the number that records, you know, the book and page.
Most of the title companies does it electronically.
Yeah, they do today. Yes, they do. In fact, you can do it. You can go to Paradise Valley Mall and record your documents today and get your book and page receipt. And that's what you need. Yeah, they've had that for a number of years. I tried it out. I checked it just to make sure. And it works amazingly. As long as you pay, and you can pay with a credit card or a debit card, they will insert your document. they make a copy of it, so your original gets returned, but it gets stamped with a book and page number and the little recorder's code
So
on
we
there.
can go down and record a deed or so.
You can, you literally can. It's just the most amazing thing.
Is that an extension of the recorder's office?
Yeah, and the kiosk is right in Paradise Valley Mall.
It's in the mall.
There's
Yeah.
one over
It's just
here
funny that it's
too.
called a kiosk, that you can, yeah, it just says
You
it's
just
right.
walk up and, I know, it's weird. Well, that's why I went to Tesco's.
To talk to the girl in the camera, in the camera.
Oh, I didn't have anybody talk to me, I had to read everything.
Yeah, there's one on the west side, I can't remember where I did it, and it's like a TV monitor, and you're actually real time with the girl down there. And she'll tell you, okay, put it in, okay, slide your.
Oh, I didn't have that.
Yeah, it is really cool,
Technology.
so it makes you more feel like you're there.
Yeah. The guy in front of me was recording his quitclaim deed because he just got, his divorce had just been finalized. So
Oh,
he'd gotten a quitclaim deed from his wife and he's stuck it right in there.
Quickly.
He was recording it. I thought this is so cool. Yeah, and he got his little receipt. Yeah. Okay, so that's a condition, 20 through 28. Next condition, 29 through 30. Buyer acknowledges that failure to pay the required closing funds by the scheduled close of escrow, if not cured after a cure notice is delivered, pursuant to section 7A, shall be construed as a material breach of this contract, and earnest money shall be subject to forfeiture. So I asked the question of Scott Drucker, who is the AAR legal counsel, why does it say subject to? And he said that all of the factors are investigated prior to the title company making a decision on refunding money. And that they are required to do by law, because they are, remember, they are regulated, and actually it's the escrow piece, they're regulated by the banking industry. The title side of it is regulated by the insurance companies. So for any time they receive money in this process, then there's a whole set of federal money law that now has to come into place. That's why the CFPB had such huge impact on their operations when they came out, when they replaced the HUD settlement statement with the new closing disclosure document. So they will always investigate each section of the contract for conditions and clauses and where violations occurred. The most important thing, if you expect to get money out of a transaction that has failed, is if you've not issued a cure notice, you do not have a breach. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, most people do not know that. If you don't issue the cure, there is no breach. Yeah.
For a while, some of the instructors were even suggesting that you initiate a cure before, so that
Closing,
it
just to make sure.
Oh, before it
to make sure
happens.
that it closes on that day.
Yeah.
But it seems like from here, that would not actually hold water. You'd have to wait until the day of closing. If it doesn't, then you issue the cure notice.
No, you can hit a
No.
cure 3 days in advance to ensure you're gonna close on time.
Can you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
If you have evidence that things aren't done or your timeline isn't being met, then absolutely you issue the cure
How
notice.
would you know that something isn't being?
Anything
If
along
loan
the
docs
lines of
aren't
an
in,
LSU, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
loan docs aren't in, you don't have final approval, buyers haven't come in to sign. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons. Or from the buyer's perspective, the buyer has performed everything, but the seller's not completed their repairs. You know, they've done their walkthrough, which is typically done at least 3 days in advance. You don't want to do it, you know, too much further back from that.
So 2 or 3 days in advance, go ahead and issue a cure notice if there's a question about anything.
Yeah, and you know, when I teach these classes, I get a lot of agents saying, well, I don't want to rock the boat, I don't want to upset the buyer, I don't want to upset the buyer's agent. And my response is always, then call them first, call the buyer's agent, and tell them, you know, I have to protect my seller, I'm issuing a cure notice, they're going to be signing that today. We're hoping and we're going to help you get this completed. Hopefully your people are going to come to the table like they're supposed to. But I have to issue this cure notice. And you might get pushback or you might not, but the point is you have to represent your seller, your client, whether it's the buyer or the seller. That's your job, because it comes down to, you don't have a breach, earnest money is going to go back to the buyer.
Yeah.
That's
If you-
automatic.
And if you never serve them a cure notice, they can go however long without it.
Right.
They could just never close if you never if
It's
you never
considered
cure 'em.
an automatic extension if there's no
Yeah.
challenge to the timeline. So you have to show that you're gonna enforce this contract, that you're gonna enforce the language of the agreement. And that's how we do it, is with the cure notice. And you'll notice, even this printed, how he has sample on everything.
Yeah.
On every one of these forms, he has sample, because they're all copywritten and they belong to Arizona Association of Realtors or to the Regional Multiple Listing System. The reason for that is it's giving notice that we are going to enforce this document. You can't use it without education, without knowledge, without understanding the legal terminology that's in this. So that I teach a lot. The lawsuit that occurred in California that cost the California Association of Realtors over $2 million. And it was over their contract. And I remember the day, I can still tell the day, that, you know, our local association in Prescott used to tell me all the time, it's not a big deal if you give out forms to the sellers or buyers. You know, let them use the forms because it prevents major problems. We saw our forms as a cure-all to helping people do transactions. It answered a lot of questions, it provided a lot of information if they fill in all the blanks, right?
Except.
So California Association of Realtors had the same philosophy. And there was a for sale by owner. And a buyer shows up for the house with a downloaded copy of the California Association of Realtors form. And he just printed it off, and they sat at the table and filled it out, signed it, opened escrow, right? Now, I didn't get to see that contract and how it was prepared, but it resulted in a lawsuit against the seller and against the California Association of Realtors by the buyer. And because there were things that the buyer was expecting that didn't happen, and he was saying as a result of the contract. And it was just their lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
So this is a legally prepared document. Attorneys have had their fingers all over these documents. And the California Association of Realtors lost because they did not protect their copyright. So now you will see everywhere they post, you cannot use this form without the advice and education of a real estate licensee. That's what protects them from these lawsuits. And if you Google these forms, you'll find them online. They're still out there. But you can't get them off the association website anymore without this sample across it. And the only way you can get it without the samples is if you're a member, because they don't want to be sued. And it's true, there's so much stuff in here people don't understand. They don't know what it means. So that's why. Yep. Here's a good one. Line 31, all funds are to be in U.S. currency.
No Bitcoin?
No Bitcoin. So, what you do need to know though, is that last year, the Arizona legislature passed a law allowing blockchain technology, which is separate from cryptocurrency. You know, a lot of people like to combine them, and it will involve that eventually.
The
But,
record keeping, yeah.
yeah, the blockchain is the record-keeping portion of it, and there's a number of classes. Bill Gray's teaching a number of classes on this. I'm hosting one in Scottsdale on the 25th of March. He really teaches or is educating real estate agents as well as title companies, escrow companies, on how the blockchain is going to work. So we passed this law. We were the first state in the nation to do that. We also have what is called the sandbox. How many of you are familiar with the Arizona sandbox? That's a legislated approval. You might remember a couple of years ago, there was legislation proposed to Arizona to allow people relocating here who had a specialty come here and work for 18 months without paying for additional licensing fees or education or whatever our government requirements were, so that they could open up their businesses. Do you remember that? Because real estate agents were included in that. And we got the real estate agents pulled out. That's where your rate pack dollars really come in handy. We got the real estate agents pulled out, but the sandbox was approved for a lot of other professions, like dental, therapists of different kinds, x-rays, certain medical functions, and financial functions. So what that means is, and it's in our legislation, I just don't remember, it's under the state portion. What it means is they can come here and operate for 18 months and they are audited by the Attorney General's office as far as performance and whatever, and then they would be granted their license based on that 18 months if they wanted to continue operating in the state of Arizona. That's where breakthrough technology has landed. It's now in an 18-month sandbox. It's being audited by our state government, and we've already had at least, I'm told many, but I know of one in particular real estate transaction that actually occurred via blockchain. Amazon, that's what their whole foundation, when they enter the real estate market internationally, will be based on blockchain. Zillow is setting up for that right now.
Jeez.
Blockchain, yeah.
And why do they want to do that?
It's just the next level. If you think about it, that's why it's so good to take this class to understand, because people feel very threatened by it. It's actually a response to all of the cybercrime that we've had, and wire fraud. So there's privacy protection that is included in this. There's wire fraud protections that come with this blockchain technology. There are 2 or 3 different softwares currently developed that are offering this as a process. So when computers got developed and the internet got developed and we were able to now send our documents via email and collect electronic signatures, that was a step up from where we were with the paper copies and using FedEx and all that kind of stuff. And this is just another higher level.
But involving people to do work?
Yes. So here's what happens with this, and here's some concerns. And I don't know how it's going to roll out. I look at this and I think, yeah, there's some strong possibilities that real estate agents will not be agents anymore. My thought is we will be facilitators of a process. So you would have this contract written to as part of the blockchain. So the blockchain is, if I had a whiteboard, what it is you have a transaction and then it's linked to the next step. That creates blockchain, 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 and each one of these sequences has its own special identifier. And you could have pages and pages of these identifiers, but they cannot be corrupted, they cannot be changed. They're like poured in concrete and steel. So the only way you can change them is to advance another step to make a change. Like if you wanted to renegotiate a sales price in a contract, you would have to create another block to do that. You can't go back.
Still stays there for
And the
reference.
old stuff still stays there. So it is a complete chain of every step in the transaction. Every signature, every date, everything gets a sequence number.
Did you say Nicole was going to be teaching it?
Bill Gray is teaching it.
Bill Gray?
Bill Gray is
And-
But
teaching
where
it.
does this other people from outside come in?
So,
Come to play?
so this is how it's looking. So first of all, ASU is very foundational in the research on this blockchain technology, and they have formed groups. They have a research center. They have formed their first blockchain society where young people are joining to learn more about this. There are software companies that are developing software to sell. Blockchain will make everything available worldwide. So it's not just state by state now. It's going to be an international marketplace. So you will have your offerings, say you have a listing on a property, or say you're a seller. You don't even have to list with a real estate agent to get full exposure. Can you see how this is going to impact the value of the MLS? But it's already being impacted by Zillow and by all these other websites that are offering properties for sale. So you can be a homeowner that decides, okay, I want to sell my house. And you can open up a transaction using this software. And so you can do a one-time use or you can buy a full platform. So brokerage firms will probably buy a full platform from the software company. You put your house on the market, it now goes out to worldwide. So say somebody in Denmark decides they want to buy your property. They will, using a preloaded, approved form, make you an offer. And you, the seller, read the offer, and you either accept or you counter or you reject it. Once you do that, you have to then follow all of the provisions of that agreement. Like for this state, you would need to get the SPDS because we're a disclosure state now, so you have to disclose. Buyers have to do their due diligence. So none of the terms and conditions of the agreement change except for currency. So currency, blockchain, will accept Bitcoin, all different kinds of cryptocurrencies, and I can never remember the names of them. Dash, there's Dash and Gas and some, there's a whole bunch of weird names for all of these types of currencies. And then they will convert them and deposit them in your account. You have to know what the conversion rates are, what the fees are. There has been one real estate transaction on the sale of a condominium that actually went all the way through blockchain with one exception, and that was the actual recordation, because our county recorder's office here in Maricopa is not set up for electronic recording. So you still have to you can't just do it off the internet. It still has to be done through their process.
So was an agent used on that?
An agent was used, the brokerage firm was used.
Because I could see how it could go all the way through
And
without
actually-
any agents.
And her husband, yeah, it could. It absolutely could. And this woman's husband is part of that ASU Research Center. So that's why she offered this property in blockchain.
Where were we? I think it was like 59th or 67th from the 101. There's a sign on the light pole that said that there was a tenant that was looking for a landlord that accepted Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It was so random. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's in many cases, cryptocurrencies are already being exchanged.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are being exchanged.
Tenant looking for a landlord that accepts Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to become all over the place. Title and escrow are probably the most concerned about this because this blockchain will literally replace what the escrow officer does.
Yeah.
The title people will still be there. The escrow people, you're still going to need somebody to go in and make certain and sign off on certain things. But that's a lot easier than preparing those big fat hard copy files that they have to have. And our state still, our statutes are so old, they still require hard copy. Brokerage firms have to save the hard copies. Schools, I'm a school, I have to save the hard copies. I have to save all this stuff. For 10 years in my case, I think it's 5 years in your case, and most brokers save it for 7, just to make sure that something doesn't come back and bite you.
Just forever.
But it's ridiculous that we have to do all that. Even if you have it on a computer, you still have to have the hard copy.
But it's
Sounds
gonna
like
get to a
Lance.
place where it seems like, because people don't read the details.
They don't.
And it's kind of like,
And they fall for things
No
that are
guidance.
too good to be true. It sounds like land scams are gonna come back.
yeah.
Well, that's where the buyer and the seller are really gonna have to be savvy. And that's the other reason that I don't believe that real estate agents will ever be replaced. And I argue that with a lot of different people. There's a lot of people out there that think there will be no need for real estate agents. I don't think we're gonna be agents in the meaning of the legal term of agency, actually representing best interests. You may not even know the people that have ever met them personally or seen them on the other side of the agreement. That's very possible. So I would think then that we would become more like a facilitator, managing the process, making sure that all of the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, that kind of a situation, which they actually tried to get approved here in Arizona back in the mid-90s. I don't know if you know that. But we tried to change from real estate agents because of all of the high numbers of agency lawsuits that we had, for violating agency relationship. And the reason we couldn't change it was because of our Constitution, Article 26 of the Constitution. requires us, so that's why. But I do think that will change.
Now, I know you're still, we need to get back, but you said you're gonna be doing this class on the 25th?
25th of March,
Okay.
yes. It's right off the 101 and on Pima Parkway Center. If you're interested, give me your card. I will send you all of the information in a map.
And it's
I think
called
you're finding good.
blockchain real estate?
It's, I haven't titled it yet, but it's gonna be blockchain technology and legal issues, real estate. He's gonna talk about the statute and what the law requires and how it's gonna be implemented, where it's being tested now, because it is happening now. There are title companies that are using it. First American is using it. They were one of the first,
That makes sense.
yeah, they were. They're right on line with it because they really see it's coming. And there's one other, I just can't remember who it is, but I know First American is there. So, and they think it's really important that we start educating people on this. I will tell you, the commissioner, your Arizona Department of Real Estate commissioner is against this, totally against this. Governor Ducey, all for it. He's got a whole division at administrative level of state that is introducing this everywhere. They went to San Francisco. They've rolled out what we're doing here. I mean, Arizona's really on the map with this. So it's coming. There's no stopping it. And I don't think we could stop it even if we wanted to, because it's being done. It's happening now. So, okay, I need to cruise through this pretty quick. The possession is also a condition. Just make sure on the possession for properties, you know, if you're not allowing extra time at the end of your close of escrow, then you're probably going to wind up having to deal with a pre or a post possession. It's become standard language in California that the seller gets 3 days following close of escrow, just because of all of the challenges with our closing disclosure statements and the timelines not being met perfectly. They don't want to move out and have an empty house and not have something actually close the escrow. And we've had sellers that have incurred a lot of expense in relocating, moving out of a property, only to get prolonged and prolonged and prolonged when they need the money from their sale. So you're going to start to see that a lot. If you don't have a good pre and post possession agreement, I have one of each that got developed by an attorney. It's been probably 5-6 years ago, and I'm happy to share that.
Does it include insurance issues?
Oh yeah, it addresses everything. It's really well done. I'm happy to share it with you if you'd like
Okay,
it. I
please.
will email it to you.
Yeah.
Then addenda. Addenda, according to the law, everything that we would attach here to the contract is also considered a provision, a legal provision and a requirement. Page 2, fixtures and personal property, all of that is a condition. Additional existing personal properties, condition. Then financing. Financing gives us the biggest challenges in resolving transactions that don't close escrow. Your pre-qual form is listed here. If you don't have one, you're already in breach of contract. People don't realize that because we've named it in here. And I've had agents say it's a worthless form. And maybe it is. It's probably not worth, the paper it's written on. But the fact is, it calls for it in here, so it has to be included. And the important thing, if you go to, I think it's on page 12. Where's my pre-qual form? Yeah, page 12 in your packet. I highlighted line item 41. If that pre-qual is not signed on line item 41, you have violated a law in this state. So make sure you do not accept this form unless you have permission. If you notice, it says grants permission to the broker to submit with the contract. You have to have written permission. And that gets missed a lot. Puts you at liability. Loan contingency. This is a clause. Loan contingency. Buyer obligated to complete this sale. So this says how the conditions, the financing conditions, is going to be handled. This specifically says what the buyer's rights are and what the seller's protections are in this situation. Unfulfilled loan contingency is a condition and a clause. It does both. Same with 2D, interest rate necessary funds. It's a condition as well as a clause. And 2E is a condition, loan status update, meaning the lender has to perform on this. Loan application, condition, in fact, everything in this whole section now is a condition. From this 22F all the way down to 2M. Title and escrow, 3B is a clause telling you how it's going to work for here, because not all title and escrow is done the same in every state. Title commitment and title insurance, that's a condition, a provision of law, so it has to happen.
As far as the title stuff, to what extent, like, because we were talking, was it 2 weeks ago, about the title report.
Yeah.
To what extent, as an agent, do you do you read through every single one every single time, and are you like on top, like, because?
Are you talking about the Schedule B items?
Yes,
or are you talking
exactly.
about their
Yeah.
languaging?
Well, mainly, like, do you actually open it up and read the Schedule B
Absolutely.
every
Yeah.
single time? Okay.
Yes, every time.
And how often, I guess, because number one, when we were going through the class, none of the agents even knew what it was. the
I
other
know.
night. It was crazy.
I know.
And so I pulled mine up, and it's weird because when you go online and you're trying to explain it, you have like Texas, California, and stuff like that, right? So Schedule B, Schedule C, like the one that I pulled up had the Schedule B, and then it had a bunch of stuff underneath it, right? To what extent should we be worried about the other stuff? Because that's always worried me. Like,
Yeah, it depends on what it is, really. So there's the typical stuff there, like if there's taxes that are still due. So what that Schedule B, and that's the most important page, is Schedule B, tells you what they are not going to insure
That's
against.
exceptions, yeah.
That's the exceptions.
yeah.
And that's the piece that you really need to get information on. So, and I will tell you, learning how to read Schedule B is what protected me when my attorney sued me on the sale of the property in Chino Valley that had the landing strip. If you remember me telling you that
Yeah.
story. It was, the legal description was not insured by the title company. So they had the, yes.
Was not an extended
It was on
policy.
Schedule B, and the legal description was there, because they said the mapped route, and they had attached a map. The route that I had used to access that property was not legal access. It's what had been used for years, but it was not the legal access.
So would
The
you-
legal access actually took me much further north and in, and on a primitive road, really, a primitive road, and came down into the property from the north instead of from the south. And we could not get legal access because part of that access crossed state land.
I had a- I had a-
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I had a
Yes,
situation
So I was
where
reading an
everything
analog
was
article.
probably a week and a half out.
Wow.
Some escrow docs with descriptions of certain items were delayed. And but it seemed to be going okay. Then all of a sudden, the agent calls me, the buyer's agent, and we had to put everything to a stop because in the description of access that we received, I didn't read it. And if I did, I didn't understand it because it had something to do with some kind of a situation where the BLM land intersected with the common access for the whole community, 10 feet, across the road, and now it
break time.
it basically
Oh, was that you?
Oh,
Not
almost.
almost.
it basically it did not give anybody legal access, even though they had been living up there for 20 years. It stopped the loan right then
Yes,
and there.
Wow.
yes.
Until we cleared it with the BLM, and it was that one little statement that the
Yeah.
other agent caught and stopped the whole deal
Yeah,
for the time being, and.
yeah,
and-
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with any federal or state lands.
But,
They don't have to grant you access.
here's what the irony I thought was.
Yes, ma'am.
There are probably 100 people living up there that had loans on houses in the past. Nobody else had ever caught it. This agent did, and it stopped that deal, and it stopped every sale for a period of time until it got cleared up.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
How long did it take?
About another 4 to 6 weeks before
Oh,
before
that's not bad at all.
BLM provided some information that allowed the lenders to feel confident that,
They weren't gonna close off the road.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was crazy. But but that basically said for years, decades, no agent
Right.
had ever read it
Had ever
or
looked.
understood it.
So
Yeah.
for us kind of spoiled people that aren't necessarily in rural areas, that, because, I mean, I don't know how many homes I've sold, you know, easily a couple hundred probably. I have not had any serious title issues, and apparently I've been very lucky. And everything's worked it out. Like when I call, like I'll call the escrow officer. I'm like, hey, did you anything pop up that you saw? And nothing. But 99% of mine are in normal subdivisions and normal
Right.
things.
And
right?
that's really typical for Maricopa County.
Yeah.
And even parts of Pima County.
So am I just lucky? Like extremely lucky, I guess.
Yeah. For this area, you might not have the meets and bounds or access
Yeah.
situations or concerns, but you might, what we see a lot here is IRS liens
Yeah.
that will automatically lien a property, and lenders will
Yeah.
absolutely not forego that. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way.
Well, we like those things. In my opinion, those are normal, right? So when we see those, it's just okay. We clear those up, you know. But I've never had anything due to a cloud on title or anything prevent a sale. I guess you can say. Like it's never been a permanent thing. We're screwed. This
Yeah.
is done.
And that's really typical for here.
Okay.
One of the things that I did in commercial, you always ask for an extended policy. An
Yes,
extended policy always requires an ALTA survey.
right,
An ALTA survey will cover encroachments,
yes,
meets and
Yes.
bounds, the
Yeah.
whole thing.
yes,
Then the title company will insure it
yes,
under the ALTA policy.
yes, they
Commercial
will.
every time.
There are certain things they still won't, but where it's really important, the standard versus the extended is mechanics liens. Because under the standard, mechanics lien is not covered, but under an extended policy, they will cover a mechanics lien. You will see mechanics liens, and you did see a lot of them here when our downturn hit. There were a lot of contractors that did not get paid for work that they had been doing on properties. Your IRS liens, you know, having it attached to a property that a buyer is buying does not give it a priority lien. Actually, IRS liens are not a priority lien. The lender would be the priority lien, taxes first, and then their lien would be in second position, or an HOA, they had an HOA. The concern for the lenders with that situation is this buyer going to default? Is this a good loan? It changes the risk ratio for this lending this person money. If they can't pay the IRS, how on earth are they gonna make a house payment? And if they've already captured all their other property, because IRS will collect everything, not just real estate. They'll go after all assets, jewelry, bank accounts, whatever you have.
Your undershorts.
Your retirement, yeah, that's right, they will. So, but yes, actually, it's funny you bring that up because I talked to an escrow officer just yesterday about teaching how to read the title policies. Schedule A, is it accurate? Are we checking those things? Do we know where the property, who the seller is, who the buyer is? All of those things. And here's the other most important thing. And our laws say we are the primary point of contact on a transaction. PPOC is what the commissioner calls it. You are the PPOC. That means you are supposed to be managing all of this stuff as an agent for the person that you represent.
And a professional.
Their job is not to call the escrow officer and say, well, what does this mean? Their job is to call you, their representative, to find out what does this mean. And I have to tell you, it's never failed. Anytime I'm in escrow, if I don't get the documents the same time my buyer does, I'm gonna get a call from my buyer. What does this mean? Did you read this on this line? What does this mean? Explain this to me. And I was lucky though, having been trained back in the old days, I know how to read all this stuff. And I'm not afraid to admit if I don't know something. I'll call.
I always ask for a preliminary title report,
I do too.
just for in case there's something shows up on
Very
it.
wise.
Then you have time
Yep.
to work with it.
And they've got them, they'll send them, they don't care. I have never had a title company refuse me a copy of the prelim. And I tell them when I open escrow, here's my checklist, these are the things that I'm hoping you're gonna help me manage, because I need to see this stuff. So, I do wanna get to our case studies though, I know we're
Yes.
kinda behind. Good conversation. let's see, okay, got just a couple of minutes, oops, just a couple of minutes. So all of the title and escrow stuff it's all, we were on 3D. So this is where escrow gets really angry, title and escrow, because we put in our contract, we obligate them to our language. And they accept it because they rely on our business so much. But this area here has to conform with the laws that they are managed by, and it also obligates them to deliver exactly what we've asked for in here. The ancient escrow officer will tell you that they typically just do what they normally do, but if you've worked with as many escrow companies, well, and I know some of you have, I make sure that all of this is done exactly in accordance to this contract, because this is what you're going to have to defend in court. It's going to be your contract. It's not going to be the escrow instructions or anything else. This is what's going to decide the outcome of anything. So 3D is a neutral third party. It includes now not just the buyer and the seller, but your title or escrow company. Tax prorations, of course, are a provision of law. That's a condition. Release of earnest money. This is a condition, and then we have clauses that explain that have to be met for how it's going to be handled. 3G is a condition. There's your break time. And 3H is a condition. I should have stopped that. Disclosure, condition, 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 all the way through. It's all conditions. So under disclosure, it's all provisions of our disclosure laws that are now in place in the state of Arizona. So take your break, take a 15-minute break, grab some snacks. Charlotte's done a beautiful job of providing food and goodies in there, and then we'll resume.
Have you ever checked 175?
Pardon me?
Have you ever checked 175?
175
I've
is...
never had 175 checked. I've always used 175.
Oh, the lead-based paint
Yeah,
disclosure?
yeah. I've never required a seller to provide anything as competitive. It's never been a concern in my mind. I don't have one.
Well, I always do the 173 also, but when I list a property, I have the seller document loaded into the documents. So if you're gonna be writing me an offer, you've got it there to present. Just like the SLUD. I do the SLUDs, I do the map maps, I do